Russian casualties are going up, which isn't that surprising considering they're making a very, very kind of desperate attack on Bakhmut. Let's talk about this report from the UK Defense Ministry, because it seems to be indicating that the Russians are taking much higher casualties than they have in other points in the war. And that is pretty concerning, since the Russians should at this point be stabilizing their recruitment numbers, be stabilizing casualties, not having them get more and more out of control. But the toll for the conquest of Bakhmut continues to rise as they get closer and closer to taking it. Russia, and here's the title of the Insider article, Russia has likely suffered its highest rate of casualties since the beginning of the war in the past 2 weeks, according to the UK Defense Ministry. Let's read the article. In the last 2 weeks, Russia has likely suffered its highest rate of casualties since the first week of the invasion of Ukraine, according to the UK Ministry of Defense. The Ukrainian General Staff said that the mean average for the last 7 days was 824 Russian casualties per day, which is over 4 times the rate reported in June and July of 2022. The UK Ministry of Defense said in an intelligence update on Sunday. Now, first things first, this number is from the Ukrainian General Staff. So take that into consideration. 824 casualties a day is a lot. You're getting close to 1,000 casualties a day. That is an astronomically high amount of casualties to be taking. But this is as reported by the Ukrainian General Staff. And you can trust the Ukrainian General Staff, but I will not usually take the General Staff of an army's word on it when they talk about the enemy's casualty count. You at least shouldn't take it at face value at the very, very least, right? But this is a big number to be suffering every day. It's an unsustainable number. And so the question is, will this number then stabilize out after the Russians try to take Bakhmut and possibly succeed in taking Bakhmut? While the department said it could not verify Ukraine's methodology, it said that their trends are likely accurate. The reason for the increase in Russian casualties is due to various factors, including a lack of trained personnel, coordination, and resources across the front, which the ministry notes can be seen in Bakhmut and Volodar. Now in Volodar, and I released a video on my second channel if you guys wanted to check it out about Russia's failed winter offensive. Russia recently tried to take Volodar, and in their attempt to take it, they got absolutely wiped out. What they wanted to do is they wanted to use the vehicle's exhausts of armored vehicles and tanks to give them a smoke screen so they could approach the city and capture it. But what happened instead is they ran into a minefield, were attacked by drones. The artillery was pre-coordinated, so it struck them, and they just aimed for where the exhaust was coming from, and they ended up destroying over 30 Russian vehicles and who knows how many Russian soldiers. And whether that happened due to just poor planning, poor coordination, lack of experience, or possibly and probably a combination of these factors, I don't exactly know. But what I talked about in that video is that as Russia deals with higher and higher casualties, they're going to replace more and more of these experienced soldiers that made up a lot of the bulk of the invasion during the start. You know, the VDV, the Marines, and a lot of the more experienced soldiers. They're going to be replaced more and more with conscripts who have minimum training, or people who are just not as a high enough quality, of a quality that is as high. And of every war in the past, whether it was World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the soldiers that were green, the new arrivals, they ended up having much higher casualty rates than the veterans, because they don't know all the things. They don't know what all the sounds are. They don't know how to properly use every gun. They don't know how to properly use the defenses, and they have to slowly learn this. And that learning process can be deadly. And so what I said at the time, and other analysts have said this as well, is that as Russia continues to throw more and more men in the meat grinder, they're going to have to rely on recruiting more and more people that are not of an extremely high quality. I don't think the Russians are going to, quote unquote, run out of men anytime soon. They are from a big country that has a lot of people in it. What they're more likely to run out of in the near future is not only the more advanced weapons, since they can't import the foreign parts necessary to make these longer range, high precision missiles, and so they're going to have to rely more and more on old Soviet stockpiles, old Soviet tanks, old Soviet armored vehicles, but they're also going to have to rely upon less and less experienced troops, which just makes the casualties numbers higher because they're dealing with worse equipment, with less medical gear. And as we talked about before, we've had reports of Russian soldiers just straight up not getting first aid kits and literally being told, just go buy tampons, that'll plug the wound. So we've got like less effective equipment that is in bad shape being given to soldiers who are less trained and have less experience and don't really know what they're doing. And as that dominates the military more and more, the casualty numbers are only going to get higher. Where before it was like 900 good Russian soldiers and 100 bad ones, as more and more of those good soldiers die, they're going to be replaced with more and more of the bad ones, which is only going to intensify the amount of casualties the Russian military is taking. And so there is a possibility that this spirals out of control to the point where the casualty numbers gets even worse than what we're seeing right now. Or it stabilizes where it is now, meaning that they're going to be taking heavy amounts of casualties like every day, which what might be sustainable for a certain period of time, but it's going to be hard to take large cities and towns with inexperienced troops who don't know how to storm these cities using old, faulty equipment that's rusted out or isn't that effective, or at least not as effective as the new modern stuff. Trust me, we know from Chechnya and other locations that the Russians can just flatten stuff with old Soviet gear, but it's not nearly as effective as the more modern Russian equipment that they want to produce. In fact, there's actually been talk from some of these defense companies that are working in Russia of stopping to produce the more updated equipment and reverting to produce old Soviet equipment, because maybe then they could produce more and it would be less expensive. But that would also mean degrading the amount of new equipment that the Russian military is getting. While they can throw a lot of lives away at this, the more lives they throw away, the less bang for the buck they're going to get. In the last 2 weeks, Russia has likely suffered its highest rate of casualties since the first week of invasion in Ukraine, according to the British Ministry of Defense. The Ukrainian General Staff said that the mean average for the last 7 days was 824 Russian casualties per day, which is over 4 times the rate reported in June and July of 2022, the UK ministry said in an intelligence update on Sunday. While the department said it could not verify Ukrainian methodology, it says that the trends are likely accurate. The reason for the increase in Russian casualties is due to a variety of factors, including a lack of trained personnel, coordination, resources across the front, which the ministry notes can be seen in Bakhmut and Volodya. These are 2 locations that the Russians are also very desperately trying to capture. The Ministry of Defense noted that Ukraine has also suffered high losses. Ukraine claimed on Tuesday that 1,030 Russian troops had been killed in the previous 24 hours, which would have marked it as the deadliest day for the Russian forces in the war so far, even deadlier than the first few days of the war. While it is difficult to accurately track the death toll of the war, Western officials estimate that Russia could be approaching nearly 200,000 casualties. Now, this is the high end. I was looking at the Ukrainian predictions, and the most recent Ukrainian death update. One second. Let's see. Ukraine-Russian death toll. Official Ukrainian government. If you look at the official government update, it's like 130 something right now. It's, according to them, it's 130 something. Let's see. Casualties of the Russia-Ukrainian war. Where is the total? Do you guys know where the government posts the daily stuff? Does anybody have that? Somebody has to have it. They post it every day. Somebody will post it in a second. Let's finish the article. The Ministry of I already read that. While it is difficult to accurately track the death toll of the war, already read that. The toll in less than a year of war is 8 times higher than all American casualties in 2 decades of war in Afghanistan. In recent months, fierce fighting has been raging in eastern Ukraine, with Russians trying to take the city of Bakhmut in the Donetsk Oblast. Mercenaries from the Russian private military company Wagner Group has played a large role in the war in Ukraine, particularly in Bakhmut and its surrounding areas. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, said in a video published on Friday that he believed the fighting in Ukraine could continue for several years, he reported. Actually, not only did he say it would continue for several years, I actually know the statement he made. He said it would take a year and a half to 2 years for them to capture all of the Donbass. So not for them to beat the Ukrainians, but for them to just capture all of the Donbass. An insane statement. Here it is. Here's the total combat losses for today. 138,340 casualties, with 560 Russians dying today, 3 tanks, 4 armored combat vehicles, 3 artillery guns, 2 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 2 things with special equipment. So this is the Ukrainian statistics on this. If it is true that it's getting near 200,000, that means the Ukrainians are off by tens of thousands of casualties for the Russians, which I highly doubt. Where were we? Oh, yes. He said that it could take 1.5 to 2 years for the Russian forces to completely capture Donetsk and Luhansk regions, which Moscow last year claimed as republics of Russia in an internationally condemned move. However, if the goal was to occupy up to the Dnieper River, this could take up to 3 years, he said. Although Prigozhin does not speak for the Russian military, his comments provide insight into Russian expectations of the war. My goodness. Oh, and here is a map of the war up to this point. As you can see, the Russians with the Japanese have made it up to the coast of California, and they're trying to take the neutral zone here. Sorry, isn't this the map from Man in the High Castle? Pretty sure this is a map from Man in the High Castle. Okay. So, Russian casualties are going up, which isn't that surprising considering they're making a very, very kind of desperate attack on Bakhmut. They're not taking their time. They're trying to take it sooner rather than later so they can turn to the public and say, see, you sending your father and son today wasn't worthless. We took Bakhmut. That's part of the reason. It also was one of the stepping stones for them to take all of the Donbass, which is one of the main goals of the Russian army. It wasn't really the only goal when they started the war. They wanted to overthrow the government. That's why they were trying to take Crimea. Not Crimea, but they were trying to take Kiev. But I will say that the Russians right now are looking better when it comes to taking Bakhmut. They have the one line into Bakhmut and out of Bakhmut under fire control. They haven't captured it, which means supplies can still get into Bakhmut, but Bakhmut's under a lot of pressure. It's surrounded on 3 sides, and the one route out is being shelled heavily by the Russians. They're really trying to capture it. And there is a lot of commentary from American defense analysts and the American government basically suggesting that it would be better for the Ukrainians to leave in the next week or two, in the next couple of weeks, because they should probably be leaving on their own terms and not on the terms of the Russians, which could make it a more desperate situation for them because they don't want to have troops encircled in Bakhmut and they don't want to, lose Bakhmut to the Russians, taking high casualties. And so the Ukrainians are in a really difficult position right now where they don't know if they should be giving up Bakhmut and following this advice so they can live to fight another day, or making it so Bakhmut is fought like tooth and nail. It's become very symbolic in this war, making it so the Russians have to lose every single soldier possible in order to take Bakhmut. But the Ukrainians only have so many men too. So I don't know. I lean probably more towards leaving on your own terms if it's become obvious that they cannot hold Bakhmut. Live to fight another day is the idea. Dunkirk is another thing I would point towards. That was a live to fight another day moment. Yo, did you guys see this nonsense? Okay, I don't know if I want to do a full segment on this because I've already complained about Starlink and Elon Musk enough. But can we I do want to talk about this tweet. And I'm not going to do a full second on it, but this perturbed me a bit. So as we've talked about, and there should be a piece on this being released on my second YouTube channel, DylanBurnsLIVE, tomorrow. We talked about this last week, and I have a big video on my main channel about Elon Musk and Starlink, which you guys can go check out as well. So Starlink has said that they will no longer allow Starlink to be used to coordinate drone strikes by the Ukrainian military. So up to this point, Starlink has been used a lot by frontline commanders under the guise that, hey, internet connection near the front line of the war is very spotty. The Russians work very hard to try to jam internet connection, but Starlink, due to the fact that it has a satellite that connects with its own separate satellite system in space, and all you need is a satellite dish and a good view of the sky, you can use it to communicate with command, communicate with others, access the internet, and, you know, look at like live stream footage of a drone and coordinate drone strikes and execute them. And so Starlink recently, after so much controversy Starlink's gotten into around Ukraine in recent months, after, you know, Elon Musk proposed a peace plan that was never going to work and wasn't really feasible. It really felt like it came from a lot of ignorance. After Elon Musk made a lot of statements that pissed people off, all of that goodwill that Elon Musk earned with Ukrainians earlier on in the war when he sent Starlink to assist them started to slowly fade away. Definitely after Ian Bremmer, who is an analyst, you can go look up yourself if you want to see his claim, claimed that Elon Musk had a call with Vladimir Putin, and Putin told him that if the Ukrainians were to go into Crimea, that would start World War III. And that was what stopped Elon Musk from allowing Starlink to be used in Crimea. Now, Elon Musk denies this, but the damage is already done. Now, recently, after this report was published, Scott Kelly, who is a senator, also an astronaut, by the way, made a tweet at Elon Musk saying, "Hey, at Elon Musk, Ukraine desperately needs your continued support. Please restore the full functionality of your Starlink satellites. Defense from a genocidal invasion is not an offensive capability." This was the excuse that spokespeople for Starlink used, that we didn't want our weapons to be used for offensive capabilities. It's a defensive war, but I guess they mean like weapons that could kill. It's survival. Innocent lives will be lost. You can help. Thank you. Elon Musk responds, "You're smart enough not to swallow media and other propaganda BS, okay?" So Elon Musk has decided to step upon his high horse, puff out his chest, and start banging immediately, saying like, "Bosh, if you believe at all that we should be allowing them to use Starlink to coordinate these drone strikes, you must have been brainwashed by the media, or you have been propagandized, Mr. Senator." This comes from the same man, Elon Musk, who was, you know, pumping up tweets and responding to tweets saying that thousands of NATO soldiers had died in Ukraine and fighting. This comes from the same guy who made tweets suggesting that David DePepe, the person who tried to bash in Nancy Pelosi's husband's head after he broke into her house in an attempt to torture her, was actually the gay lover of Nancy Pelosi's husband. This is the man who's now going to tell Scott Kelly what he needs to know about media literacy. The same man who accused a rescue diver who was trying to save kids in Asia from drowning in a cave of being a pedophile because he didn't like his submarine proposal, right? This is the guy who's going to get on his high horse about media literacy with Scott Kelly. Okay, let's keep going. Starlink is the communication backbone of Ukraine, especially at the front lines, where almost all other internet connectivity has been destroyed. But we will not enable escalation of conflict that may lead to World War III. Let me say that again. But we will not enable escalation of conflict that may lead to World War III. Elon Musk goes to Scott Kelly and tells him, "Ha, you've been propagandized. If what you ask for comes to fruition, though, the world will explode. You've been propagandized. But if we allow them to keep using Starlink like they've had for the last 11 to 10 months, the world will explode." Get out of here. This is the type of stuff you hear from like a schizophrenic on the sidewalk with the sign saying, the end is near, the end is near. Not out of what is supposedly one of the richest men in the world. No longer the richest man. He's been dethroned from that claim, but one of the richest men in the world. If they have been able to use Starlink in this capacity up to this point and are now being denied or have been denied in the previous months, why didn't that use of Starlink lead to World War III? Why didn't it even come close? There has been no point in this war where World War III was like, oh my God, it's an inch away. The closest you can come to was when anti-air capabilities flew up, missed a Russian missile, and landed in Poland. That's the closest. And that had nothing to do with Elon Musk's Starlink being used. I have seen nothing from the Kremlin that seems to indicate that if they keep using Starlink, we're going to nuke the world. And, you know, the thing is with World War III that's kind of scary and stops the Russians from engaging in it is blowing up the world might sound fine and dandy as a propaganda piece as Kadyrov busts his chest and he gets to act like a big man. But there's one problem with this plan for the Russians. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Russia is actually located in the world. And so if the world blows up, so does Russia. Russia is not the only nation with nukes. The United States has nukes. France has nukes. The United Kingdom has nukes. And a lot of other countries have nukes. So when we talk about like the end is near, the end is near, what we're saying is that Starlink being used by Ukraine and the way it has been used many times before up to this point will, for whatever reason, now cause World War III. Why? What's the logic here? You can't get on a high horse and say the senator has been propagandized for asking you to allow the Ukrainians to use Starlink, how they have used Starlink up to this point very effectively, and then just spit out, the world will explode if I don't do this. Like, get out of here. Fucking hero complex from Elon Musk. And the thing is, he could have just kept doing what he was doing if he wanted to be seen as the hero. If he wanted to jerk himself off and act like the savior, he could have just kept doing what he's doing. But no, he needs to play peacemaker, the same person who suggested the majority of Eastern Ukrainians want to be part of Russia, just spouting out Russian state talking points. Who is saying, well, if you look at the 2012 election results, that shows that Eastern Ukrainians want to be part of Russia. Completely brain dead. Doesn't make any sense on face value. Why would people voting for Yanukovych necessarily translate into people voting to be part of a separate country? Could you imagine if we translated, well, he voted for Trump, therefore he'd want to be part of a second confederacy? What? Those are two totally separate things. There's no polling data that reflects the majority of Eastern Ukrainians wanting to be part of Russia. There's no polling data at all. And don't say, oh, well, they speak Russian. I speak English. If there's anything I don't want to be, it's a fucking British person, okay? A lot of Irish people, actually, the mass majority of Irish people speak English. Does that mean that the Irish want to be part of the UK? A lot of Africans speak French, but that's because of the history of colonialism, not due to a reverence for French culture. That's due to colonialism. And so I don't know why Elon Musk has to play doomsday profiteer here. It needs to pretend that if they allow Starlink to be used to coordinate strikes, that the world will explode and will escalate into World War III. The Ukrainians are already using drones, Elon. The Ukrainians are already using HIMARS. The Russians are already using drones, Elon, and they're using drones to target Ukrainian civilian buildings, apartment blocks with people in them that are dying. Where does he come off? Where does he come off from saying that this is going to end the world or this could end the world? From what perspective? How? You can't just casually float. Well, if we allow the thing that's already happening right now to continue happening, then the world will explode, and just expect people to take you seriously. What silly nonsense from Elon. I was speaking about this though during the segment. Did you guys see what Kadyrov said about Eastern Germany? Did you guys see this? I gotta play this clip. So Kadyrov was ranting and getting angry on his show recently, and while getting like ranting and going on, and well, not on his show, but he was on a Russian state TV television program. While he was on it, he started talking about Schultz, the Prime Minister of Germany. I know, I think it's the German Chancellor, getting really angry about Schultz, and he goes on to say that when it comes to East Germany, that this is our territory and we should go and take it back. Very imperial mindset that one day the Soviet Union occupied East Germany, therefore we should take it back, it belongs to us. Let's read the subtitles. Schultz, he visited our president. He was nimble, soft as a panda, and now he speaks from the rostrum and makes such statements with hatred for us. Gorbachev or whoever withdrew our troops from there. The Germans have been punished as traitors, so they would. The Germans should have been punished as traitors, so they would understand their place. We should go back to it. It is our territory. It was an erroneous decision of our past leadership. It must be changed. Slowly, we need to get in there so that we can control them at any time. So, let's talk about what would be necessary for the Russians to control East Germany. Map of Soviet Union. Because if they believe that Germany is part of their territory, that belongs to them. Map of Soviet Union at peak. Let's look at all of the countries that would technically be part of the USSR here. Here it is. So this right here is just showing in Europe. We're not even talking about Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, or all the countries in Central Asia that would also be part of the Soviet Union. We're not talking about Georgia. We're not talking about Armenia. We're not talking about Azerbaijan. We're not talking about any of those countries. We're just focusing here, right? So we're already not talking about those countries. But if this was to happen, this would mean that they would need to control Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria. When we talk about Yugoslavia, it's a little bit more complicated due to Tito. But then there's Hungary, the Czech Republic, Poland, before eventually moving over into Germany. And parts of Austria, of course. I mean, this is wild. I mean, this is never going to happen. It's not really within the realm of possibility of the Russians moving all the way over into Germany, but it does show intent from high-ranking Russian officials. Kadyrov, very high-ranking, basically controls all of Chechnya, and is one of Putin's right-hand man. He was installed into power by Putin after his father's death, after his father backstabbed Chechen revolutionaries. And this shows that they really don't have an intent to stop at Ukraine, and believe that the mistake here wasn't invading Ukraine in the first place. The mistake here was ever trusting the Europeans to begin with and allowing them to not be subservient to Russian interests. That seems to be the problem that Kadyrov is pointing at here. Let's look at the other clip that I wanted to bring up. Here is him talking about how the Ukrainian leadership should kill themselves, and that Kadyrov keeps a loaded gun near him at all time in case he has to kill himself. Let's play the clip. I'm for them to understand, so to speak, like Hitler himself in his time made a move to shoot himself.
Сами как Гитлер в свое время сделал шаг застрелился
And that would be the best course of history for Zelensky. I even have a trophy handgun I brought specifically for Zelensky. Okay, so this is talking about he brought a gun specifically so Zelensky A could kill himself or he can kill Zelensky. There was a gun that Hitler shot himself with, a Mauser.
Гитлер застрелился Маузером. Сейчас, если это отсюда вытащить.
Here's a pistol. It's a trophy pistol. They bought me a real one as a commander. I can lend it to Zelensky so he can shoot once. By the way, can I just say, that woman looks so unbelievably uncomfortable. Just want to bring that up here quickly.
Я могу, да, ему это доверить, да, чтобы он сделал один выстрел, да. А так я не...
Loaded?
Заряженный.
Loaded.
Заряжен.
Для Зеленского.
Для Зеленского специально держу, да.
For Zelensky specifically, I'll send it to him so he can make a decent deed.
Он сделал, да, ну, шаг достойный, да.
My goodness. The thing is I feel like the Russians on one hand, they need to like wake up the populace in order to, you know, go to war. Like, we must all serve our patriotic duty. This is we're fighting all of NATO, and that is why it's taking so much time and it's so difficult. On one hand, they're saying we're fighting all of NATO, and it's the most difficult struggle in the war. But on the other, like ever, it's an incredibly difficult struggle. But on the other hand, they're winning so dominantly. They're taking out the Russians. I mean, they're taking out the Ukrainians so overwhelmingly, so ultimately, that Zelensky might as well just like kill himself. That it's already over. The war's already won. Don't worry about it. They want to have their cake and eat it too. That this war is extremely difficult because we're fighting all of NATO. That's why we haven't achieved any of our strategic goals. But on the other hand, we're winning so dominantly, they might as well kill themselves. There's like, no matter what, they win. They could be retreating out of Crimea and they would be calling it the most brilliant strategic move of a lifetime. My goodness.